And what's going to be their demands, and what's that going to, what's that going to drive airlines to have to innovate around?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting area because you and I, Nick, we're at a conference just a month or so ago, and one of the inverted commas hot topics was this idea that airlines, all of a sudden, and not so sudden for some of them, but generally there is this drive to becoming retailers. So they're not just selling a bum on a seat in an aluminium tube; they're trying to do other things, and I think that has quite a fundamental effect on how they then have to communicate and have that relationship and an engagement with their passengers, because it isn't just about making sure they check in, making sure they actually get on the plane, making sure that they deliver their luggage to them. That kind of broadening of services into other things just has, on the one hand, lots of challenges, but if you're trying to be more half full about it, lots more opportunities. So I think as a result of that, because it isn't just about giving them the ticket or selling them the ticket and making sure that they pick up their boarding pass on an app, it's hitting them at the right time with the ability to sell them a duty-free voucher or something like that. So I think just broadly, this kind of broadening of retail services just changes the dynamic a little bit about the way airlines have to think about how they communicate, and just operationally it has a much bigger effect. And that goes back to what I said previously, is that in a multi-device world and in a multi-channel world, being able to do that on every type of device or every type of channel, whether it's a voice related one or whether it's an automated chatbot related one, needs to be taken into consideration.
So it's partly it's service and retail working hand in hand there, rather than it being, which has been quite traditionally siloed, I feel, in it. But then also being able to, have all the wiring, available, I suppose, is part of it. It's making those options so that everything can be API'd up and connected through.
I mean, that's correct. On the one hand, or the one end of the conversation, you've got people like Ryanair who claim to be driving to kind of Amazon for travel, or they're trying to Amazonize travel, for want of making up a word. And then on the other end, you've just got an airline that wants to be able to sell car rental, and everyone else is kind of in the middle. So as you're correct, do we just do separate things and think about those as individual lines of business, or do we think about putting it into the wider kind of, this is what we do as a carrier, as your kind of service provider that gets you to where you want to go?
Absolutely. Well, what's your perspective from outside the industry then, Nick?
I'm interested in the mention of Amazon, because I've been talking to them recently, and it strikes me there's a limitation of the language that we use. We talk about transactions and purchases and retail and so forth, and yet you talk to Amazon and they'll talk about how do we delight the customer. It's a completely different way of thinking about the customer experience. And when someone presses a button on the website, from then on they think about the promise. What's the promise that they've made to the client, and how are they going to deliver on that promise, the product, and also the experience of receiving it. So I think that's why I'm always hesitant about things with tech, because it just looks like everything's related to tools, but it's not. It's really, how does the customer feel at the end of it?
What's the promise? Like, that's awesome. That could definitely work. Ashley, what do you think? What are the challenges for the airlines around this that you're working with them on?
I think what it means, what we have just been talking about in terms of retailing, the underlying issue is that the whole airline world is not made around the customer, it's made about PNRs, single moments. And I think this unique view of the customer, even because this is missing, makes it even more difficult to, what has just been said, to think as a retailer, to think about the customer and how to delight the customer, how to address the customer and customers in the right way, the different types of customers. And this coupled with, I would call it, the zero tolerance by customers, because they get used to the Amazons of the world, to the Googles and so on. They get used to a proper performance and continuous improvement all the time. And so they don't accept anymore that something is poorly handled, that they don't find the information, that they are offered seats during their check-in, even though they have already booked seats before. So I think this is actually the major challenge that airlines are facing, because it means some really structural change in terms of thinking, not thinking operationally, but thinking customer, but also making this possible in terms of technology.
I do, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out with, like NDC and One Order and all of the other initiatives that are out there at the moment. They're a good idea if they work and people can adopt those technologies. But all the airlines I talk to seem very confused about how complicated that's going to make the world, if you see what I mean. I actually think looking at going back from the Amazon point of view and thinking, what was the promise is quite interesting.
Just Kev here, just if I could just interject on this. I mean, I think what's the flip side of this is that airlines know they have to do something. I think it's IdeaWorks forecast, I think was it $60 billion in ancillary revenue global airlines last year. So airlines have woken up to this idea that not only can they sell tickets, but they can also make some extra money, or they can discount on the tickets and upsell on other things. So it's hard cash that's also having an effect here, because they realize that they can make some more money, and that's the thing that airlines need to do. And I think sometimes when we're all commenting and commentating on things like this, we sometimes forget that, well, it is also for making money as well.
I totally agree. I mean, I've seen very few initiatives that are good for the passenger experience that don't make more money as well, because I think a lot of it's cutting out the fat. It's not, like Ursula said, it's not randomly trying to sell someone something they're never going to buy. It's optimization of the experience, I suppose, what I'm talking about.
I think I'm interested. It's also there's a problem around cybersecurity around that data ownership, because you may have a fine amount of information about a passenger, but the passenger's preference and personalization may reside somewhere else. So how do you have access, or what permission has that passenger given for that information to be used to improve their journey? And so making it an advantage for that passenger to share information is also useful for them.
Absolutely. That data, data is something we can talk about all day long, and we have done actually. But it's interesting to see from a legislation point of view. We've got GDPR coming in. We've got a lot of legislation around locking down people's data. But a lot of the survey trends show that customers would rather you share their data if it means they get a better experience. There's a lot of the results of talking about millennials again. They don't they would much rather get spammed with things that they want than just get spammed generally. The issue isn't whether they want you to share the data in most cases, it's just they don't want you to screw up using it.
Yeah.